I've seen you, of course, several times, and thought how pleasant you looked. It's so seldom one meets anyone really. Really nice, in a place like this. I wanted to meet you too. Won't you sit down? Thank you. I feel as if I know the furniture so well. Mine is just the same. It's a shame. I've told the landlady over and over, you can't make people feel at home if you put all the same furniture in the rooms. But she maintains that this maple furniture is clean looking and cheap. The landlady's told me about you. Your husband is in the army. My husband was in the army. He's been dead for nearly 5 years. He was a very distinguished looking man. I see you have flowers too. I love flowers. I bought myself a big bunch of asters tonight to brighten up my room, but they fade so quickly. I prefer plants just for that reason. But why don't you put an aspirin in the water with your flowers? They will last much longer. I'm afraid I don't know much about flowers. I didn't know about putting an aspirin in the water, for instance. Actually, Mrs. Allen, I had a reason for dropping in. Other than to make my acquaintance? I don't know quite what to do. I don't like to say anything to the landlady. It's so slight, but someone has been coming into my room, and I've been missing things like handkerchiefs, little inexpensive jewelry. Nothing important, but someone's coming into my room and helping themselves. I'm sorry to hear it. You see, I don't like to make trouble. It's just that someone's coming into my room. I haven't missed anything of value. I see. Do you have an idea who it was? I believe I do. I can see where you wouldn't like to speak to the landlady. Of course not. I don't blame you. It has to stop. If it doesn't, I'll have to do something about it. I can see that. The whole thing is very unfortunate. You'll have to excuse me. I tire very easily and I must be in bed early. I'm so happy you came down to see me. I'm so glad to have met you at last. I hope I won't be bothered again. Good night. Good night. first. Then she went to the dresser, opened the top drawer, and looked in. Her handkerchiefs were there, in a neat small pile, and next to them the cigarettes and the earrings. Everything is here, Emily thought, all put away and very orderly. Mrs. Allen was standing in the doorway watching her quietly. Listen, Mrs. Allen. Yes? Yes? I came down... I had a terrible headache and I came down to borrow some aspirin. I had this awful headache and I thought surely you wouldn't mind if I just borrowed some aspirin. I'm so sorry, but I'm glad you felt you knew me well enough. I never would have dreamed of coming in, except for such a bad headache. Of course. Let's not say any more about it. You just take 2 of these and go to bed for an hour. Thank you, you've been very kind. I'll run up later today just to see how you feel. Thank you. Now we invite Reese up for the second story. This was a trial by combat, and we're doing short stories from Shirley Jackson today because we love her. And the next one is going to be The Tooth.
Standing on the sidewalk next to the open door of the bus, Clara Spencer held her husband's arm nervously. I feel so funny. Are you all right? Do you think I ought to go with you? No, of course not. I'll be all right. It was hard for her to talk because of her swollen jaw. Are you sure you'll be all right? I'll be back tomorrow night at the latest, or else I'll call. Everything will be fine. By tomorrow noon, it will all be gone. I feel so funny, lightheaded, and sort of dizzy. That's because of the dope. All that codeine and the whiskey and nothing to eat all day. Tried to sleep in the bus. Did you take a sleeping pill? Yes. I feel so funny. It's just a toothache. Nothing very serious about a toothache. She lay back peacefully against the seat. She could feel the sleeping pill pulling at her. The throb of the toothache was distant now and mingled with the movement of the bus, a steady beat like a heartbeat, which you could hear louder and louder, going on through the night. 15 minutes. She got up and followed everyone out, all but her eyes still asleep, her feet moving without awareness. She saw a seat at the end of the counter and sat down, not aware that she had fallen asleep again, when someone sat down next to her and touched her arm. Traveling far? Yes. You want coffee? She nodded. Drink it quickly. The strange man was talking. Even farther than Samarkand, and the waves ringing on the shore like bells. When she sat down in her seat again, the strange man sat down beside her. The flutes play all night, and the stars are as big as the moon, and the moon is as big as a lake. Nothing to do all day, but lie under the trees. My name is Jim, the strange man said. She was so deeply asleep that she stirred uneasily without knowledge, her forehead against the window, the darkness moving along beside her. Then again that numbing shock, and driven awake, she sat frightened. What's happened? It's all right. Come along. She followed him out the bus into the same restaurant seemingly, but when she started to sit at the same seat at the end of the counter, he took her hand and led her to a table. And while we were sailing past the island, we heard a voice calling us. Put your head on my shoulder now and go to sleep. I'm all right. Once more she slept, and once more the bus stopped, and she woke frightened. And Jim brought her again to a restaurant and more coffee. The bus was moving forward when she realized that she had left her bottle of codeine pills sitting on the table in the restaurant, and now she was at the mercy of her tooth. Jim was saying as she fell asleep, "The sand is so white it looks like snow, but it's hot, even at night. It's hot under your feet." Then they stopped for the last time, and Jim brought her out of the bus and they stood for a minute in New York together. I'm going to the dentist. I know. I'll watch out for you. The grass is so green and so soft, he said, smiling, and the water of the river is so cool, the sky is bluer than anything you've ever seen, and the songs. When she turned into the office building where her dentist was, it was still very early morning. I have a toothache. Come right in. We won't make you wait. Extraction. Yes, doctor. I'll call them right away. Take this slip of paper and go right up to the address. On this card, it said surgeon dentist. They'll take care of you there. What will they do? They'll take that tooth out. Should have been done years ago. She thought she must have been asleep again when the taxi stopped suddenly, and the driver, reaching around to open the door, said, "Here we are, lady. I'm going to have a tooth pulled." Jesus. Good luck. There were closed doors on either side of the hall. Some said DDS, some clinic, some x-ray. And somehow, most comprehensible, said ladies. Yes. Lower molar. Yes. They called about you. Will you come right in? There were labyrinths and passages seeming to lead into the heart of the office building, and she was put, finally, in a cubicle where there was a couch with a pillow and a wash basin in the chair. Wait here. I'll probably go to sleep. Fine. You won't have to wait long. Will it hurt? No. You won't know it won't hurt. You know it won't hurt, don't you? Yes. The dentist came in and smiled on her from over her head. Will it hurt? Now, we couldn't stay in business if we hurt people. We couldn't stay in business at all. All you gotta worry about is telling us all your secrets while you're asleep. Want to watch out for that, you know. Lower molar, he said to the nurse. Lower molar, doctor. And then the whirling music, the ringing, confusedly loud music that went on and on, around and around. as she was running as fast as she could down a long, horribly clear hallway with doors on both sides. At the end of the hallway was Jim, holding out his hands and laughing, and calling something she could never hear because of the loud music. As she was running, and then she said, "I'm not afraid." Someone from the door next to her took her arm and pulled her through, and the world widened alarmingly until it would never stop. Then it stopped, with the head of the dentist looking down at her. The window dropped into place in front of her, and the nurse was holding her arm. "Why did you pull me back? I wanted to go on. Did I talk? Did I say anything?" You said, "I'm not afraid," just as you were coming out of it. Oh, did I say anything? Did I say where he is? I didn't say anything. Where's my tooth? All gone. Never bother you again. With a little slip of paper in her hand, she went out through the glass door and saw the door marked "Ladies" and went in. There were 4 or 5 women around the wash basins, combing their hair, putting on lipstick. She went directly to the nearest of the wash basins, took a paper towel, and soaked it until it was dripping. And she slapped it against her face violently. Her eyes cleared, and she felt fresher, so she soaked the paper again and rubbed her face with it. Then she realized that she was in the way of women in a hurry, so she dried her face quickly. It was when she stepped a little aside and glanced into the mirror that she realized with a slight stinging shock that she had no idea which face was hers. She looked into the mirror as though into a group of strangers, all staring at her or around her. No one was familiar in the group. "You'd think my own face would know me," she thought, with a queer numbness in her throat. There was a creamy, chinless face with bright, bold hair, and a sharp-looking face under a red-veiled hat, and a colorless, anxious face with brown hair pulled straight back, and a square, rosy face under a square haircut, and 2 or 3 more faces pushing close to the window. "I hope I'm not the blonde," and lifted her hand and put it on her cheek. She was the pale, anxious one, with the hair pulled back. When she realized it, she was indignant, and moved hurriedly back through the crowd of women, thinking, "It isn't fair. Why don't I have any color in my face? There were some pretty faces there. Why didn't I take one of those? Even the blonde would be better." She unfastened the beret and engraved on it was the name Clara. "Clara," she said aloud. "Clara?" She got rid of her stockings. She drew an empathetic rosy mouth on the pale face and put on pink cheeks with the rouge. After a few minutes, Jim came out of a crowd of people passing, came over to her and took her hand. Her hand in Jim's hand and her hair down on her shoulders, she ran barefoot through hot sand. Thank you.
Thank you, Reese.
We want to thank Reese and Alef for hosting us It's a great experience, and we're glad to have you also participate. We are MARUSKES, and this is our last, right?
Story, yes.
Yes, this is our last story for today. Thanks for coming.
This story actually was the first one I read from Shirley Jackson, and it's still my favorite. It's called Afternoon in Linen. I think I can relate very much. Tania also.
Yes.
Was a long, cool room, comfortably furnished and happily placed, with hydrangea bushes outside the large windows and their pleasant shadows on the floor. Everyone in it was wearing linen. The little girl in the pink linen dress, Mrs. Cater in a brown linen suit, Mrs. Lennon, the little girl's grandmother, in a white linen dress, and Mrs. Cater's little boy Howard, in a blue linen shirt and shorts. The little girl thought, I'm a gentleman all dressed in pink paper. Howard was sitting at the piano playing humoresque in careful and hurried tempo. I played that last year, the little girl thought. It's in G. He's bigger than I am, but I'm older. I'm 10. If they ask me to play the piano for them, I'll say no. Harriet loves to practice. Harriet, won't you play for Mrs. Cater? Play one of your little tunes. I don't know any. Of course you do, dear. I don't know any. Harriet, dear, even if we don't want to play our little tunes, I think we ought to tell Mrs. Cater that music is not our forte. Harriet has written some poems. Recite one of your poems for Mrs. Cater, Harriet. Don't know any. Poems. Harriet write poems. Bet you couldn't make me write a poem if you tried. You couldn't make me either. I have your poems at my top desk drawer. Bring them to me. The little girl hesitated for a minute, watching her grandmother's straight mouth and frowning eyes. Howard will get them for you. Give them to Mrs. Cater, dear. The grandmother cleared her throat, smiled at Harriet, and began to read. When evening shadows are falling and dark gathers closely around, and all the night creatures are calling, and the wind makes a lonesome sound, I wait for the first star to come out and look for its silvery beams, and the blue and green twilight is all about, and ground alone, star gleams. I didn't write it. I copied it out of a book. I found it in a book, and I copied it and gave it to my old grandmother and said I wrote it. Harriet, I don't believe you. I did so. I found the book in the library one day. It was a book called The Home Book of Verse. And I copied every single word. I didn't make up one. She went over and took the papers out of her grandmother's unresisting hand. And you can't look at them anymore either. This is Tania on the saxophone. I'm Lida and we are MARUSKES. Take it easy.